All right, strap in everyone, because today we are diving deep into some seriously out there predictions.
Ooh, I love a good deep dive.
Me too, especially when they're as wild as this one. So get this. We're looking at a live stream from a Polish clairvoyant named Krzysztof Jackowski.
Clairvoyant. Okay, you have my attention.
Yeah, this guy claims to have visions, and he's not shy about sharing them. The live stream is titled Pełnia Wizje Na Żywo. And let me tell you, he makes some bold predictions about global events, wars, economic collapses, the whole shebang.
Sounds intense.
Oh, it is. And the thing is, this guy has a track record of helping the Polish authorities solve missing person cases.
Really?
Yeah, there are even thank you letters from the police right there in the video.
Huh. That definitely adds a layer of, wait, is there something to this?
Right. It makes you wonder if there's more to this guy than meets the eye.
I'm intrigued.
Well, one of the first things that jumped out at me was this almost casual mention of Robert Monroe.
Robert Monroe, as in the out-of-body experience guy.
The one and only. Well, Jackowski uses Monroe's ideas to talk about reincarnation and this wild concept of the soul being able to inhabit anything. Not just human forms, but anything.
Wow, that's a pretty big idea.
It is, and he ties this idea of a super adaptable soul to the importance of our actions in this life. It's almost like what we do now has consequences for our soul's entire journey, you know?
Yeah, that's a pretty heavy concept to drop in the middle of a prediction about global events.
Right, but then he goes from soul stuff straight into the current war in Ukraine. And let me tell you, his predictions don't exactly paint a rosy picture.
What does he see happening?
He sees a potential escalation of the conflict, possibly leading to a divided Ukraine.
A divided Ukraine. That would have huge implications for the entire region.
Absolutely. And he even suggests that Poland might end up in a weakened position within the European Union as a result of this conflict.
Wow, given Poland's role in supporting Ukraine, that's a pretty significant prediction.
It is. And then he throws this other curveball into the mix. He talks about this deal he sees happening between Putin and, of all people, Donald Trump.
Putin and Trump. Now, that's an unexpected pairing.
You can say that again. Jackowski paints it as this temporary peace in Ukraine, but one that just sets the stage for an even bigger conflict.
So, like a false peace.
Exactly. And this time, the conflict shifts to the Middle East.
Okay, so we've got escalating conflict in Ukraine, a potential U.S.-Russia deal, and then a whole new conflict brewing in the Middle East. It's starting to feel like a global game of chess.
It does, doesn't it? And on top of all that, Jackowski predicts this protection umbrella replacing full NATO membership for certain countries.
So not only are we looking at potential conflicts escalating, but we're also seeing a potential shift in global alliances.
It's like the whole world order is being reshuffled. And, you know, even if you take all of this with a grain of salt, it definitely makes you think, right?
Absolutely. It's hard not to get drawn into these kinds of predictions, especially when they touch on such major global issues.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about war, peace, international relations. It's stuff that affects all of us.
And on that note, I'm really curious to hear what else Jackowski has to say. It sounds like he's just getting started.
Oh, he's just getting warmed up. Trust me, there are plenty more predictions where those came from, and some of them are even wilder than what we've already discussed.
Well, bring it on. I'm ready for more.
All right, buckle up, because things are about to get even more interesting. Okay, so remember how we were talking about potential conflicts and shifting alliances? Well, Jackowski doesn't stop there. He also predicts massive migrations out of Eastern Europe.
Migrations. On what scale are we talking?
He doesn't give specific numbers, but he paints a picture of a huge exodus of people fleeing from something.
Fleeing from what? War? Persecution?
He's not clear on that either, but he does say that these migrations will be met with resistance from other nations. It's like this clash between desperate people seeking refuge and countries closing their borders.
That sounds like a recipe for a humanitarian crisis.
It does, doesn't it? And to make matters even more complicated, Jackowski throws in a couple of seemingly random but impactful predictions.
Okay, hit me.
First, he sees a major earthquake happening somewhere under the ocean.
An earthquake under the ocean. That could trigger a tsunami, right?
Exactly. It could have devastating consequences for coastal communities.
And his second prediction.
This one is a bit of a head-scratcher. He predicts 2 Arab countries declaring war on Israel.
Another war. That doesn't sound good.
But here's the thing. He says it'll be more of a war of words than an actual physical conflict.
So it's a propaganda war. Or maybe cyber warfare.
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely adds another layer of tension to an already volatile region.
And remember, we're still dealing with the potential fallout from that economic crisis he predicted earlier.
Oh yeah, the global economic meltdown.
Can you imagine the kind of impact a global recession would have on migration patterns and international relations?
It's almost like all these predictions are interconnected, feeding off each other.
Like a domino effect, one thing triggering the next.
And then, just when you think it can't get any wilder, he drops this bombshell prediction of a global attack on currencies.
An attack on currencies. What does that even mean?
He calls it a global attack on money. Basically, he sees a new form of currency emerging, one that's tied to gold, which would lead to the devaluation of traditional currencies.
Like a global reset of the financial system.
Exactly. People would lose their savings, the old currencies would become worthless, and this new gold-backed system would take over.
That's a pretty radical scenario.
It is, and it raises a lot of questions like who's behind this attack, and what would the implications be for the average person?
It's hard to even imagine the level of chaos and disruption that would cause.
And don't forget, Jackowski also hinted that the U.S. might be involved in all of this.
Wait, the U.S. orchestrating a global financial crisis? To introduce a new gold-backed system?
That's what he seems to be suggesting. It's like something out of a conspiracy theory.
But if that's true, what does it mean for the rest of the world? Would other countries just go along with it?
Those are some big questions, and I don't know if we have any answers.
But it's definitely something to think about, especially if we're talking about a potential global reset.
It makes you wonder if we should be preparing for this kind of scenario, like what can we do to protect ourselves if something like this actually happens?
I don't know, maybe start investing in gold.
Maybe. But even then, there are no guarantees.
True. But hey, at least we're having this conversation, right? It's better to be aware of these possibilities than to be caught completely off guard.
I agree. And the thing that really gets me is that Jackowski predicts all this turmoil will last for about 8 years.
8 years, that's a long time.
It is. But here's the kicker. He says that ultimately it will result in a better world.
A better world after all that chaos.
That's what he claims, and it makes you wonder, what does better even mean in this context? A world with less war, a more equitable distribution of wealth, a more sustainable way of living.
Those are some big questions, and honestly, I don't know if there are any easy answers.
But maybe that's the point. Maybe Jackowski isn't trying to give us a definitive roadmap of the future, but rather a set of possibilities to consider.
To challenge our assumptions and make us think critically about the world we're creating.
So what do you think? Are we headed for a period of unprecedented upheaval? Or is Jackowski just a really talented storyteller with a knack for tapping into our collective anxieties?
I think it's fascinating how these kinds of predictions can really get people talking.
It's like they tap into this deep-seated need we all have to know what the future holds.
Right, we're all trying to make sense of the world and where it's headed.
Exactly. And speaking of the future, there's one more prediction from Jackowski that we haven't touched on yet, and it's a big one. He talks about this idea of a global reset that will lead to a better world.
A global reset? That sounds pretty dramatic.
It does, right? But what does it actually mean? Is it a political reset, a social reset, an economic reset?
He's pretty vague on the specifics, unfortunately.
So no clues as to what this better world actually looks like.
Not really, but I think he's trying to convey this sense that we're on the verge of a major transformation, a period of upheaval that will ultimately lead to a more positive outcome.
Okay, but how do we get from all the potential chaos he's predicted to this better world? It feels like a pretty big leap.
I agree. It's not clear how we bridge that gap.
It's like he's giving us the destination, but not the directions.
Right. But maybe that's where we come in. Maybe this transformation isn't something that just happens to us, but something we actively participate in shaping.
So instead of being passive bystanders, we become the architects of this better world.
Exactly. We take all this craziness and we use it as an opportunity to create something better.
I like that. It puts the power back in our hands.
And it forces us to ask some really important questions, like, what kind of world do we want to live in? What are our values? What are our priorities?
Those are some big questions. And honestly, I don't know if there are any easy answers.
I don't either, but I think it's important to start asking them.
Absolutely, because whether or not Jackowski's predictions come true, we're definitely living in a time of rapid change and uncertainty.
And the choices we make now will have a huge impact on the future.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Krzysztof Jackowski's predictions, we want to leave you with this final thought. The future is not set in stone. It's something we're all actively shaping.
And whether or not you believe in clairvoyance, the power to create a better world lies within each and every one of us.
Well said. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep believing in the possibility of a brighter future. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay curious.